Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied, with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good tavach, a good week. We continue our journey in the life-changing Sefer HaTanya. This program is made possible by Rena Lights LLC, and it's in honor and loving memory of Rav Shmuel Yosef Littman, the son of Avram Eliyahu Plotkin, Olav Shalom. It's also Yibod L'chaim L'chaim, in schus of Rav Zevi Cheskel HaKohen and Risha Katz L'Erich Yomim V'Shanim Tevis, for many long, healthy years. So we are in the early parts of chapter 29, Perek Chof Tes in Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe is addressing yet another block, another impediment that can stop us from fully experiencing Karev Elecha Hadavar Me'ed, the personal relationship with God, with Hashem. And that is Timtum Halev, and called spiritual insensitivity. Now we've already, of course, addressed in earlier chapters a person who cannot, his mind cannot fully awaken or fully give birth to a full passionate emotion. That was back in chapter 16. We talked about someone who can't even, and there, at least, he evokes talumis libe. That it's appropriate. He knows and feels it's appropriate to love and revere God. Then in chapter 18, he spoke about someone who doesn't even have that capacity. The daitik tzara, to the point that they can't at all awaken an emotion or give birth to an emotion. And there we rely on ava misuteres. It also comes with the work, but they're relying on the inherent love that's already within him. But as we continued on, after the Alter Rebbe finished that section, then he began to talk about the different forces that impede, in addition to our own limitations, whether it's the mind or the emotional limitations. We have atzvus, the negative thoughts and negative feelings that we discussed chapters 26 through 28. And now he comes to Timtum Halev, which has some connection also to Timtum HaMoyach, also a blockage in the mind, but the main focus is in the heart. So Alter Rebbe brings the Zohar. What do you do when a person is in that type of state, where the pomim v'itim ram yeshlam timtum halev shenasa ke'evan, a periodic and frequent situation where the person's heart is desensitized and blocked, as if it were stone. And a person can't open up his heart to emotionally connect during tefillah, as well as at times cannot battle with his yetzer to sanctify the permitted things in his life, as we discussed. We're not talking about now avoiding the prohibited, because that can be just a matter of choice, that you're not going to refrain yourself from doing something bad. But what do you do when you have these blockages? So this he gave us the Eitzah HaYe'utza, the prescribed advice and plan from the Zohar HaKadosh. And he actually brings it in the name of the Amar Rav Mesivta Began Eden, the head of the heavenly yeshiva said. And what did he say? He gives an example. You're trying to light a fire, and the wood won't catch. The wood is resistant. Like he says, so what do? Now you can make the fire stronger, but the wood is still resistant. Mevachenle, you strike it. Bitush can be struck, can be the word strike, can be the word crush, can be the word pressure. But bottom line, you have to do something with this resistant wood. So too says the Zohar. Gufa de lesolig bein nohera de nishmasa mevatchen. If a body won't respond and won't receive the light of the soul, mevatchen, strike it, crush it. And that will cause the light to catch. So we discussed at length what that meant. It's eliminating this blockage. We're not talking about, God forbid, demoralizing or in any way putting down the person. We're talking about the resistant aspect. Because ultimately the goal is to transform the material world, including your body and your animal soul. But the resistant part, the thing that insists, that's obstinately insisting on holding on to its material power, that's what you need to weaken. Because then the fire won't catch. But keep in mind also that even this comes only at times, as the Alter Rebbe will say in a few lines from now, that this is not something you do constantly. You have to designate time. And it also comes, this is chapter 29, after everything else he said here. So you don't begin with this. When people learn this chapter and they say, so what are you telling me? We should go, everything we always told, don't rebuke people, don't criticize them, don't knock them, don't embarrass or shame them. Here it seems to say you should. So 3 answers to that question. First of all, he's talking about the resistance. Second of all, he's talking now after all the chapters before. And third, he's talking to you. He's not telling you to go do it to someone else. And you have to also do it with the right discretion. As we know, the Frierdiker Rebbe said, just as you're not supposed to speak Lashon Hara on other people, you're not supposed to speak Lashon Hara on yourself either. So it has to be done in the right context, which actually you could say the fourth point is at certain times. So 4 points actually, just to review again. That it's something, we're not talking about knocking the person, it's talking about the resistance. 2, it's coming after all the chapters before. 3, it's at certain times. And 4, it's to yourself. And the right circumstances to understand when you start looking at something materialistic and you want to be able to weaken its hold on you because it's so powerful, it's seduction. Just like if you contemplate, let's say the material world is a temporary thing and spirituality and godliness is forever. So it's not about knocking materialism, it's just putting it in its place. Recognizing it's a temporary thing. I'm going to give up eternal reward for a moment, for instant gratification. So it's recognizing the limitations of this hold that is not allowing the wood, in this case the body, and the animal soul to catch fire. Like he continues, Pirish nehera nishmasa, she'er nisham v'asechel einem mer kol kach limshal achumnius shebeguf. That the light of the soul, that means the intelligence of the soul, which is its way of communicating. That's like the fire trying to communicate with the wood, with the body. Doesn't shine sufficiently to curb the body's materialistic and sensuous and crass urges. Even though we learned this already, but it's good to go over it. Even though his mind does appreciate the greatness of God and he meditates, it's still it's not really retained. Like I said, the wood is not catching. Doesn't as much, to a certain extent, does not retain, does not absorb, or grasp and absorb to the extent that it could can limit the heart's sensuous urges, because of their materialism or their sensuality and vulgarity. And because he says it in the plural, he's meaning mind and heart. Vasiba. What's the siba? What's the cause for this? So the cause is, on one hand, is the fire is not strong enough. But the real problem is the wood. the body and animal soul. Because the wood is too thick, too crass to catch. The vulgarity of the klipa of the shell, which exerts itself to dominate over the divine soul's holy light, hiding and blocking that light. So as such, it doesn't allow the fire to catch, the fire of the divine soul, of the animal, of the neshama, the divine soul. So now, that's a Lezeis says, this is all explaining the Zohar. Lezeis tzarich levatshul ashpila la'ofar. That's why the Zohar tells us that you have to figuratively strike or crush the body and raise it to the ground. Dahainu l'kvoya itim, here is where he says, means to schedule certain times, not all the time. Lahashpil atzmei, to deflate the ego. The yasnivze be'ein of nimas kekosov, so that the body's materialistic elements become, as the pasuk says. What does the pasuk say? Disgusting in your eyes and repulsive. Nivze be'ein of nimas. So again, we're talking here specifically the element that resists the divine, not the very fact that you have a body. We're not talking about fasting here. We're not talking about breaking the body and afflicting it. We're talking about a meditation to help weaken the resistance of the wood. In this case, the body and animal soul to godliness. And continuing this theme, he continues, the leiv nishbar ruach nishbara. So it says in Tehillim, Nun Aleph Yutes 51:19, a heart that is broken, leiv nishbar, ruach nishbara, leads to a broken spirit. So a broken spirit can be defined the spirit of the person. The Zohar explains that no, it's the spirit of the klipa. As the Alter Rebbe says, hi asitra achra. So how do you weaken the resistance of the wood? So says the pasuk clearly. You do it by recognizing the heart is broken. That is bothering you. The fact that you're resisting to godliness, to the truth, even though your mind is appreciating it, is bothering you. The problem is if it wouldn't bother you. If you're apathetic, say, you know what? I tried my best. No. It bothers you to the point that it weakens that hold. So it's like in any type of healing, the first step is awareness of the problem. If a person has an issue and minimizes it or is not aware, obviously you're not going to break through. The first step is that he's aware and is concerned and wants to do something about it. You can't help someone who's not ready to help himself. We have many situations like that. That's the wood resists the fire, and that's it. And it doesn't even say it's resisting, it just thinks that's normal. Here, there's a leiv nishbar. That's what you're contemplating on. That's what you're designating certain sessions, time, to do exactly that. To recognize, look how I become caught up and seduced by materialism. So again, it's not knocking the person, it's knocking the involvement and engagement and being seduced and being controlled by the tentacles. Like you recognize, you know what, I am hostage. Someone who says, hey, I have a smartphone. It's fine, everyone's doing it. But then you suddenly recognize, no, I'm an addict. I'm addicted to it. I can't put it down. And it bothers me. That's the first step. That's the leiv nishbar. And that causes ruach nishbara. You break taka, the spirit of the sitra achra, that negative energy. So it's essentially a person's awareness and being troubled by the fact. Now the Alter Rebbe continues, which we also learned but also very important to review again. Well, you could ask the question, okay, 1 second. What does the fact that I feel bad have to do with the klipa? Klipa has nothing to do with me, but it does. Not that just that it's affecting you. Because you could say, why do I have to feel a broken heart? I should just say, this negative thing of the physical world is a problem. Why am I personalizing it? Because it affected you. And more than that, it's defined you. You've become what you're doing. Yes, the etzem of your soul is pure and divine. But what have you become? You've become now a product of, you've become defined by the material part of your life, which is the case by a Beinani. So that's what he calls Shehi hi ha'adam atzmei bebeinim. So in other words, you could say, okay, you know what, let me attack the Sitra Achra. But the Sitra Achra has become part of who you are. Shehi ha'adam atzmei bebeinim, because in the case of Beinim, the negative energy of the Sitra Achra has become identified with the actual person himself. It's still not his etzem neshama, but it's part of who he is. His identity is a material person. And that's why it comes so easy to him, all material things. Eating, drinking, sleeping. Avodas Hashem, even a Beinani, takes work, takes effort. And even when it becomes second nature, it still takes work. Until Mashiach comes when everything will change, and then spirituality and godliness will be as natural as the physical, and even more natural. And he explains why, says the Alter Rebbe. And this is vital, because since it's become part of who you are, you can't just say, you know what, okay, there's a person who's a completely denial of all the problems. We're not talking about a person like that. That's a person where the fire is not going to catch, the wood is just so resistant. There's another person that sees the fire and says, okay, I recognize there's resistance, but it's not me. Let's deal with the resistance. And then there's a person who realizes, yes, it's become me. Don't just separate yourself from it. Yes, you need to know you have a divine soul that's behind it all. And Avamus Eteres, everything we learned earlier. But you have to recognize how much materialism has affected your life. And minimizing that does not, the wood still remains resistant to the fire. Shenefesh hachayunis hamachaya haguf. Since the energizing soul, we're talking about the animal soul, chayunis, which gives life to the body, he betokva betikildodosa beliboy. As we learned earlier, chapter 13, remains in its innate strength as it was at birth in the Beinani's heart. Because we're talking about a Beinani, we're not talking about a tzaddik who killed the Yetzer Hara on all levels. Nimtzehi hi ha'adam atzmei. So therefore, it's an integral part of the person himself. And that's not a contradiction, that Etzem HaNeshama, the pure divine Etzem HaNeshama, Chelik Elikam Mal Mamish, is the real self. But there's also the self as he's manifest in this world. In the heavenly worlds, without a body, in the higher worlds, there's only the Neshama, the Nefesh Elikis. But once it comes to the Nefesh Habamis, it's become part of your identity. That has become the person's identity. So since it's become part of you, you can't just say, you know, let's say sometimes you get some dirt sticks to your finger or to your body. You just go, you wash it off. Okay, that's easy. But what happens if it becomes part of your body? It becomes so embedded, become part of your very personality. It's not just enough to wash it off. You have to deal now with the you. And that's why you need to have time, sessions, where you say, you know what, I've become materialistic. Yes, I have a neshama and I believe in all that, and I'm contemplating godliness, but I see there's a block here. And if I want the fire to catch, I have to address not just the stain, but how the stain has affected me. We still need to explain this, because we learned in the previous chapter, if you remember, when he was talking about the negative thoughts that a person has when he's davening or learning, he said, that's coming from the animal soul. It's not the divine soul. Don't think that in any way throws any cold water or weakens your divine soul's davening. It means there's another soul. So there's two distinct. And here he's saying that we're associating you with the animal soul. It's not a contradiction. Because the fact is, you do have both souls. And you have to always know that. But the animal soul is not just a sideshow. It's become part of your identity. So the Alter Rebbe continues and says, and regarding the divine soul we say, which is also within you, but we say, the soul that you have placed within me is pure, we say in the morning. So the expression is, daika. It's precise. It's been placed in me. What do you mean in me? Who's the me? So me is the body and the animal soul. That's your identity. So from this it implies and suggests that you, the person, is not the pure divine soul. Of course, the essence of your being is your divine soul. But there's another soul that is now identifying you as you come into this world. So the question is, what's your identity? When we're talking about a tzaddik, as we'll see shortly, his identity is his divine soul. In a Beinani, and definitely in Russia, his identity is his animal soul. However, his inner core identity is his divine soul. But you can't in any way minimize the animal soul's effect. Like I said, it's not just an outside stain or just a piece of dirt that you just can blow off or blow away. So it's true, we say sins and all that is like dust that gathers on top of engraved letters, which is the neshama, the divine soul. But in this case, the dust has become part of who you are. The Rebbe once wrote in a footnote in a sikha, dust is shetevis, da sitra achre. So the sitra achre is not just outside dust completely, it's become part of your identity. And even defines your identity. Ki im betzadikim shebehem hu lehepech. By tzadikim, it's a different story. Because by them is the opposite. That the pure soul, the divine soul, is the self. And by them the opposite. The gufam nikram basara adam. By tzaddikim, their bodies are no longer their core identity. They're like a human flesh. It's like a glove that they put on, a garment. Their body is called the basar adam, the human flesh. So think of their soul, and then it's dressed up in a body. Now the truth, it's dressed up in a body. The truth is all of us are that way. But by a tzaddik, he becomes, that's his identity, the neshama. He's a walking neshama in a vehicle called a body. We are bodies and divine and animal souls with a divine soul within us. And he brings a raya to this. And we'll soon bring it back to what we learned from all this regarding the bitush, the crushing, the striking, to eliminate the resistance of this that has become our identity. But now he brings first a raya to the idea that a tzaddik, his body is only an outer dimension. It's like what it says in Chassidus is that before the tzimtzum was elikus b'pshittis and elam is b'schachus. Elikus was the given. Elamis is the novelty. That's how by a tzaddik, his neshama is a given. His body is the novelty. By a Beinani and by a Rasha, the opposite. Elam is b'pshittis. The world, the body, animal soul. That's the reality. And the divine soul is the chiddush, even though it's the core essence. Ukamaymer Hillel hazokan l'talmidav. This is the raya by the tzaddikim. We see this in the language used by Hillel Hazakin, the sage, to his disciples. Then he was going to eat. He would say, he's going to perform an act of kindness with a poor, miserable creature. This is in Vayikra Rabbah, Lamed Daled Gimel 34:3. Hu gufay, referring to his body. Ki kamoy zor nachshav etzlei, because the body was like a stranger to him, because it's not his core identity. Ulekach ulechen hu chen omar shu gemel chesed imay b'ma shemachile, and that's why he would say that in feeding it, he was doing an act of kindness toward his body. You only say that when the thing is not you. You don't do kindness to yourself. It's like being machne serich. You're inviting guests. I'm inviting guests. I'm feeding them. So he would say, when he would go to eat, we're going to now feed and sustain an act of kindness, chesed, with a poor, miserable creature called the body. Interesting, he brings that expression because that's taka the nekuda here, to see the body as a lowly entity. Again, we're not talking about the purpose of the body is to elevate it, and therefore God's purpose is within it. But on its own, it's an inferior entity. It craves and seeks and longs for things that are materialistic and crass and temporary and inferior to the eternity and the immortality of the spirit. But he recognized that, of course, as a tzaddik. That's why he would say he's feeding it, he's doing an act of kindness. Because he, the tzaddik, himself, is exclusively identified with his divine soul. But we said that the tzuf has, that even by tzaddik it also involves a guf. So the Alter Rebbe says his body and flesh are energized by the divine soul alone. Because by the tzaddik, the evil within his energizing animal soul was manifest, dressed up in his flesh and blood, which has been dressed up in his flesh and blood, has been transformed to good. And in the case of tzaddikim, has been completely transformed and absorbed into the divine soul's holiness. So he has a body, but his body is driven by his soul. Whereas by the Beini and the Rasha, the opposite. The Avodah is to have the divine soul manifest, but the identity begins with the body and the animal soul. And this is going to go back to explain that's why you need to be mashpil, you need to identify and recognize the inferiority of this physicality that's trapping and not allowing the fire to catch. Well, we'll stop here. Everyone have a good tavach and a good chedesh. This has been Tanya Applied, TanyaApplied.com.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit ChasidusApplied.com for archived classes and more resources.